Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the sponsor of this morning's Breakfast General Session, Brian Kuchma, Vice President of Sales for Black Box Network Services.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute delight and pleasure to be here this morning. Just want to take a few minutes, and if I may, share a few stories with you. I'm going to start out by getting a little bit of exercise going in the room. So, simply by a show of hands, I'm going to ask some questions because something really interesting happened on the plane ride last night. I thought it was a great little story. I want to start out by sharing that story. It's a little bit of a magical story. So, show of hands, how many folks have young children? All right, great. How many folks have young grandchildren? Good, very applicable. How many people like magic? This is going to be a story about magic. I fly about 150 flights a year. Most of the flights I take are Southwest. I'm one of those folks that are usually 1, 2, or 3 in line. Get the wonderful opportunity to sit in Southwest first class, and that means exit row outside seat. As fate would have it, I didn't get to book the trip down here within the 2 or 3 week period. And as if you ever travel Southwest, wow, they're an absolute awesome deal. Talk about listening to the voice of the customer. I think they really get it. They're also opportunistic. So when you miss that 3-week window, it goes from very affordable to let's say very premium priced, and that's okay. And we all look at expenses. So I ended up taking another airline, forgetting about checking in and reserving your seat and doing all those things. I get to the gate yesterday, and as I check in, the woman says, "Here you go." And I looked at my seat, and it was seat E. Not kind of thinking about it, I'm going, gee, seat E is in the middle, and I'm an awfully big guy. As I sit down in the middle, and I'm hoping to the left and to the right, a father and this young man who's following the father really wasn't having a good day. In fact, I would say a very challenging day. And as it happened, one was to the left, one was to the right, and I graciously asked, if, young man, you'd like to move into the middle, I'd be more than happy to take that outside seat for you. He said, "I'm fine, mister." Okay. So the plane takes off, and I was like chatting, meeting new people, having conversations, and I said something to the father, and I said something to the young man, and the young man says, "Sir, I'm busy." Goes right back to his, right. I thought, oh, okay. The father reaches over and says, "Do it again, and we're going to visit the Amish." Never heard that before. And I'm from Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so not uncommon that I see the Amish. And as we're going on, the young man says something again, and he says, "One more, and we go Amish." And it was like a switch was turned on in the young man. All of a sudden, he went from having a really bad day to almost a great day. Actually started up a conversation, turned out to be a wonderful individual. And I share this story because I thought it was a great learning environment in life. I have 4 kids. I actually can't wait to try this. At one point in the conversation, I turned to the father and I said, "What was all that about in going Amish?" He goes, "Oh, it's real simple." He goes, "He doesn't act like an adult, or he doesn't act like a respectable person." He goes, "By going Amish," he goes, "we strip the electronics. There's no phone, there's no iPad, no Xbox, no televisions, no nothing." And I said, "How long have you been doing this?" He goes, "I learned about it a couple years ago," and he says, "All I tell my kids now is keep it up. We go Amish," and he goes, "Trust me, it works." So in the spirit of passing on, I hope you'll take lots of different things away from the event over the next couple days, one of which is that. So it's a great little tool. The next thing I want to share is a little bit about the Black Box story. So as you watched our video, some of you may be familiar in some aspects with Black Box. Maybe you've used our technology and our products. Maybe you've partnered with our services organization. I'm with our products group. And as you saw from the video, we play in a lot of different areas and do lots of different things. But the most, I think, thing that I am most proud of with our organization is what we really do. and that is we save lives. We help improve lives. We prevent disasters. We reduce accidents. We keep our police and we keep our warfighters out of harm's way. And I'll share how we do that. But before I share that, I do have one more aerobic exercise for the morning. Do we have any veterans in the with us today? If you folks would please stand up, and if the rest of you would join me in a round of applause. Thank you very much for your service. Sit down, please. Thank you. As I said all this and what we do, and while Black Box does a lot of things, one of the stories I want to share today with you is how we help save those lives and how we improve quality of life. And while we play in lots of different areas, one of our areas at the core is what we call complex signal management and visualization. In other words, KVM, video walls, control systems. And while you may not think of Black Box as an eminent player in the command and control environment, the reality is over the last 12 months globally, we've probably participated in more than 600 control room environments. And those could be a DoD command and control, they could be a transportation, could be broadcasting, could be in the hospital. Again, we help improve lives, and it's just such a great and rewarding experience. I hope to share a little bit more of how we do that and what makes us unique. So if you're playing in that space, if you're interested in learning more about us, I encourage you to engage us. The other thing I wanted to share is our customers. So Black Box, as you can see, we've been at this for 40 years. We still call ourselves a startup. We don't ever want to lose that startup mentality because that means constantly adapting, constantly evolving, listening to the customer and understanding what's the next step. And from a control room standpoint, I think we've done that. We've done it, though, in a lot of cases without all of you. And as we evolve and as we change, we're hoping to change that. So as I say, I come sharing our customers, I mean that literally. We started about a year ago migrating our customer base to the channel. So a lot of these projects that we've been involved in, we've let the end user kind of dictate how they wanted to drive the project. So if they've asked us to do design, engineering, pre-commissioning, and those type of things, we did that. We listened, we learned, and we evolved. If there was an opportunity to add complex video walls or control systems, we did that. We learned, we developed, we understood. And along the way, we began to transition those customers into the channel. So there are a few folks in the room that have actually done very well with us. So as we learn and identify these opportunities, and more of our opportunities come from word of mouth. When people ask us, well, why didn't I know you did this? Why don't I know that you do this technology and you play in this space? We're very quiet. Most of our business comes from simply word of mouth, satisfied customers and said, I saw this particular application in a control room where you did a complex video wall. I want that, let's do it again, and we let that evolve. So as I say, we're here today to partner with you, to share in our business, to help you grow not only your top line, but hopefully your bottom line revenue. So thank you. I look forward to meeting and chatting with you throughout the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And now please welcome to the stage Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Integrator Magazine, Tom LeBlanc.
All right, that was awesome. That was a great story. Thanks, Brian. Just going to wait while my panelists make their way to the stage. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a good night. How about those Astros? Any Houston folks or big Houston fans here? All right, so some happy folks in the audience today. It's weird, I can hear some background noise. Sorry about that. Okay, so what we're gonna do today is kind of a unique panel for those of you who've been to the summits in the past. This is something that we haven't done before, and I'm pretty excited about it. We're gonna do what we have on stage. Typically, we have integrators, and we engage in a conversation that's very specific to running an integration firm. But today, we have an integrator and a customer. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the voice of the customer and the relationship between an integrator and a customer. It's kind of like When Harry Met Sally, except without the Billy Crystal-esque humor. So we're gonna explore the relationship. We're also gonna talk a little bit about how dynamics have changed as the convergence of AV and IT and the decision-making has gone through the IT departments. And one of the things I really want from you folks in the audience is I want you to, with me, take advantage of this kind of unique opportunity to kind of drill into an integrator-customer relationship and ask questions. So don't wait for the Q&A at the end. We will have one, but don't wait for the Q&A at the end. If you have a question, just jump in and we'll run over with a microphone and we'll get you a question. I want you guys to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, I'm gonna go Amish on your asses, okay? So, all right. So let's meet our panelists here. Andrew Mercantini, Director of IT for Ravago America. He is not an integrator, he's a customer. Andrew, welcome, and can you tell us a little bit about your company and your role there?
Well, Ravago Americas is not really a big name. We're a plastics distributor. We happen to be one of the largest plastics distributors worldwide. Ravago, the company, is based out of Arendonk, Belgium. And we sell, compound, recycle, anything you can do with plastics, we do it. The corporate headquarters for the Americas is in Orlando, Florida, and we sell little pellets.
Okay. And what do you do there?
I'm the IT director. I run. I'm also one of the other things that my title would not tell you is I'm also the facilities manager for Orlando. The Orlando office, and we take care of all the build-outs. I walked in the door 14 years ago when we were in the process of building an office, and somehow or another I got voluntold I was the facilities guy, and it's been the other duty as assigned on my job's title since.
Okay, well, fair enough. And then Peter Shipp. Peter is an integrator. He's one of the principals at Zio, which is actually an Orlando-based firm. So, Peter, maybe tell us a little bit about your firm and also about what your role is as principal. What do you do there?
Sure. So, company's been around for about 17 years, actually with foundation and heritage in the luxury residential space. So for our first 8 to 10 years of existence, we only did luxury residential, so the big control systems, theaters, media rooms, those types of projects. And we focused on ease of use, simplicity. It was typical that we would not get a chance to meet with the end user, and we had to create systems that the housekeeper or the executive could use with simply no training. And back in those days, it was a very complicated thing to do because the systems were not what they were today. As you all know, the iPhone user interface expectation totally changed the industry. But prior to that, it was difficult, clunky systems, and we did our best to make them simple. As technology evolved and the market evolved here in Orlando, we realized that there was definitely a space for us in the larger commercial systems, and really evolved what we learned and how we designed and engineered solutions in that space, and expanded in the commercial space, and now that's about 70% of our business. And that relates, and we'll get into a little bit of conversation with several projects we've done with Ravago, but that simplicity and ease of use really is at the foundation of what we've done for Ravago and companies like them, in that the goal for us is that the users walk in the room and it just simply works. There's no training required. As far as me, I'm over the technology side of the company, focus on our engineering, research and development, product development, and then strategic projects, ones that are more forward-leading, new development areas for us, future of where the company is going.
Okay, so I think to understand the context of the conversation, Peter, I want you to talk a little bit about the projects that you were working on when you initially brought on Scion. What were some of the challenges? What were some of the goals? Talk to us about that.
So,
I'm sorry, I meant to direct that question at Andrew. Sorry about that.
You said Peter's.
I did. Sorry about that.
Well, when we started this endeavor, before we actually hired an integrator, we would take televisions, hang them on the wall. We'd buy balance, we'd connect up, we'd use Ethernet cable to get it to work. Problem is that residential TVs don't have the scan ability to cover the evolving computer landscape. I mean, every time we'd get a television in, there'd be one computer it wouldn't work with. So we were able to eventually convince leadership that we needed to do something more than just hang a television on the wall like you would do at home and call that a media room. Also, with us being a worldwide company, we needed video conferencing because every time you go to Europe, it's $10,000. You just put that in a footnote because with air travel, taxes, conversion rates, everything, a week in Europe is going to cost a company about $10,000 with entertainment expenses and whatnot. So the challenge was how do we make our world smaller, being able to communicate with our friends in Europe. How do we make the rooms executive simple? And I'll explain a little bit what executive simple is. And how do we get to the point where no matter what we do, anybody from the newest person to someone who's been with the company for years can walk in and use the technology without having to be a technologist. So when Peter and I first talked, I introduced him to the concept of executive simple. Executive simple is a really easy concept to understand. Executives, the higher you go up in the food chain, the shorter the attention span gets because of the busyness of the executive. Once you hit someone with a C in front of their title, that you have about 1 minute and 30 seconds from the time they walk into the room before they call out for their executive assistants to figure out this crazy thing and make it work. I've got guests coming in. They arrived 5 minutes ago and we were supposed to start 15 ago. Make it work. So the executive assistant would come in, they would have a problem, they would call IT, IT would have to come up, and so now we have $200,000 worth of people standing in a room scratching their heads going, well, we're pushing the button and nothing's happening. So executive simple means that an executive within that 1 minute and 30 second window should be able to pick up the device, look at it, go, I want to touch the appropriate button, instructions will show on the screen, they follow the instructions, and this really incredible thing happens. It works. When we started the executive simple concept, version 1, I would call it technologist simple. But as we continue to evolve it, as we continue to change the interfaces, as you can see, a lot of those interfaces are on the screen, we got it down to a point where, indeed, the executives could walk into the room, they could just take the iPad right off the wall, touch it, and it would go. We even got to the point to where if someone just walked in and plugged a cable in, the environment was smart enough to wake up, turn on, put them on the right input, and their screen would be on the wall. It took an integrator who actually could get the concept, because in the beginning I was talking to a lot of integrators. And I saw integrators who got the concept and knew how to design it. I also saw integrators who got the concept and just wanted to push boxes and programming was someone else's problem. And one integrator actually came in and goes, oh, well, you just press this physical button and it'll all happen. Yeah, so I'm going to tell an executive who doesn't follow instructions anyhow to walk over to the wall and to press a number on the wall, and he's going to have to remember what number the button is. It wasn't going to work. So Peter came in, he caught the concept, he thought about it, and what did it take us, 6 months? 6 months of going back and forth and arm wrestling and talking about how it was going to work and figuring out which technology was going to plug in before we got there.
Yeah, about that, yeah.
And so by the time that we actually launched the conference rooms, we're actually in version 2 of the design. And I literally walked the head of the Americas into a room who has the attention span that lasts a minute and a half. And he walked in, he looked at the iPad, he touched a button, plugged his Mac in, carried his own dongles, fortunately, but he plugged his Mac in, and he was on the screen. He goes, okay, thank you, bye. That's how I know we achieved it.
Okay. Well, all right. So, Peter, from your perspective, though, this executive simple concept, the concept of not even being able to train employees on understanding the system, what was your reaction to that?
So for me, it was, yep, I get it. I know what you're asking for. We've been there. We've done that. We hadn't used that term before. So that is the Ravago trademark term that we do use with our clients, but it often gets linked back to them. But I'm thinking in my mind when I'm first hearing this, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And I will say Andrew and his team took it to a whole nother level. And I will say Andrew is not typical of IT directors that at least we're used to dealing with in terms of really understanding the AV systems and the control systems, and really understanding when we're talking in detail about architecture and choice A versus choice B and why we're going to do that. So we were fortunate in that we could have a dialogue, and it was productive. And even though sometimes we might argue about iPhone versus Android, we were able to get to a result that matched what their users were looking for. In terms of user interface design, I will say it even put us at a whole new level. And best example I can give you is one of our senior programmers was relatively new at the time. This goes back 6 years ago. And even for him, it was a whole different way of looking at things in terms of eliminating every button that you didn't need to have. Seriously looking at what's shown on the screen and what happens behind the scenes, so that you aren't presenting the users with any more than they actually need. Was even for us something that we got to a whole nother level, all the way down to, and it's kind of hard to see the user interface on here, but so this project had Apple TVs for wireless content sharing, and that was a specific customer request. We went over all the different choices, and that's what they wanted to end up with, all the way down to what do we call that? Is it Apple TV? Is it wireless presentation? Is it Mac wireless? What was the name? So everything down to what we called every source as short and simple and sweet as possible. What's the icon look like? To that level of detail was critical. But one of the other things I think that was important is the industry has migrated to so much of what we do sits on the network. To a point where we're typically designing a control system where 95% of the equipment is controlled via the network. And in this environment, and what is typical in the corporate space for us, is we don't really touch the network. And we go over to hospitality and some other markets, they put their hands up and go, you guys just do your own thing and we'll build an entire network and it's ours. But in this environment, and Ravago's no exception, in fact, to the point where they've got some really serious network engineers that know what's going on, we had to have serious conversations about what was going on the network, security, what bandwidth requirements there are, what latency requirements there were, and then their team had to make sure we had the right VLANs, the ports were configured, some things were VLAN tagged, some things were port tagged, and get through all of that. And it got to a point where we really were back and forth and hand in hand in terms of the design with their IT department and our engineers and programmers to make all of this work. So it wasn't just the user interface and the simplicity there, but it really went back to the backbone of this system, and I don't think this is anything new to anyone, was the network. And we've been in many environments and haven't been so fortunate with many clients that IT isn't so easy to work with. And the difference at the end is when this AV system doesn't work, it may likely be something that is outside of our control because we rely on their network. And if the IT department isn't in lockstep with us all the way from the beginning in the design and needs analysis, then we could have a problem and, oh, well, it's the network, and we start doing this finger pointing. And for us, the last thing we want is finger pointing. And this goes back to, and the reason I mentioned the residential stuff is because in that world, we have to be the one call that does everything. And so we had to learn all these things that if we had started in the commercial space, we probably wouldn't have had to. But we work with most corporate clients, again, we don't get to control the network, whereas in the residential space we do. So it's really important to make sure that integration occurs. And it's not just, hey, we have to be on the network, but we have to be on the same page and how that integration occurs.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
Just trying to get it interactive here. And I don't want you to go Amish on me.
Okay.
So I think we understand kind of the what of the executive simple and the AV network integration. Can you guys talk to the how? How did you get there? Tell us what the process was. Were there kickoff meetings? Was this project managed? How did you get to these solutions where you had the seamless integration, where you had the sort of user experience that you were looking for in executive simple? Can you guys talk about that?
Well, from my point of view, it was about understanding we were going down an uncharted road. And when I say uncharted, not that no one had ever built a control system in all of this, is that the requirements were incredibly high. If I could not take an executive, walk them into a room, and do nothing, and then get what they want out of the system, it was a fail. There was no gray area. There wasn't, well, okay, you got it most of the way. It was either yes, it was executive simple, or no, it wasn't. That's why it didn't go live until version 2, because version 1 was technology simple, but not executive simple. Executives don't want to understand well, some of them do, but the older ones don't. I work in a plastics industry. There are a lot of mature people in our organization. The average retirement age is between 75 and 85. They work long. They like to golf, and frankly, selling plastic is more about relationship than it is anything else. So these guys are not technologists. So when they go in and they pick up they take the iPad off the wall, all of them are already intimidated. And that's the hardest thing to get through another technologist's head, is that this simple display to you intimidates someone who's 65 and above. They just don't get it because they never grew up with any of this stuff. I mean, television was big news when most of those guys were around, and touchscreens, that was something that went on in industrial and was something they didn't play with.
Hey, Andrew, so how many iterations? Were these user-tested systems? Did you actually get these mature end users in the room and how many iterations did you all go through?
We're actually on version 4 now.
Okay.
But I will say, to add to that, the very first room, because the first project we did, the floor was phased, and we were on to the 4th floor now, I think, is where
we're going to the 4th floor now.
And so what's the total number of rooms? It's like,
well, you've got
15 or so rooms, give or take.
16
rooms. So the very first room on the first floor, the first phase, when we sat down to deliver the first user interface, it probably took, within the 4th generation of where we're at, that first room, it was tough. It was almost the firing squad. And we said, okay, we're going to double down, and we're going to do what we need to do to get this right, because we had just in that phase 4 more rooms, if I remember correctly, to get done, and pretty quickly, and this was the first room, so we had to get it right. And this was a complicated room, of course, as fate would have it. It wouldn't be the simplest room. It would be the room that's dual screen VTC, and actually it's the one that's in the picture right there. And so that was definitely the toughest in terms of, this is where we really got into, okay, what do the icons look like? What are they named? And then it's where we really match up conceptually what we thought the system was going to do and what we thought the client wanted it to do, and then actually what he thought, and making sure they align. And I wouldn't say we were hugely far off, but that last 10% or even 5%, those details are really what make the difference between, as Andrew described, as executive simple and not.
So, well, I want to get to the point where we talk a little bit about the ROI, because you pay Andrew, you pay a lot of attention to the actual value that you think you get out of a system that's truly intuitive, this whole executive simple concept. And it's not just because you don't want the executives to be inconvenienced. It's because you actually see value and you're able to come to some conclusions about calculations when it comes to what you're getting out of a truly intuitive system. Can you talk about what you learned as a result of this system and its simplicity?
Well, we had actually learned it before the system went in. What we had come to the conclusion of is the people who are using these rooms, we're in the plastics industry. We deal with small companies like Dow, BASF. You might have heard of this little company out of Delaware called DuPont. These are some of Chevron, ExxonMobil. These are people who, when they send their executives in, they're usually arriving on a private jet. They're usually big dollar guys, and they have absolutely, positively no tolerance for delays in their schedule. These are guys who are going to come in, they're going to spend 4 hours with you, they're going to leave, get in a private car, go right back to their private jet, and fly to their next meeting, and they're going to do this over and over again. When you sit down and you talk about the cost of having a person there sitting and waiting for technology to come up, you talk about our executives who are big dollar guys who are sitting around waiting for technology to come up, the ROI pays for itself very quickly. So to answer your question, what did I learn? I learned that originally Executive Simple was meant to be a destination. It's a journey because as the executives retire and new ones come in, they're becoming more technologically savvy. So we're starting to get requests for, hey, when we go and we present on Apple TV, can we have one Apple TV on one screen and another one on the other? When we started this process, we never thought about that. But the guy with his iPad and his PC that can happen to project on Apple TV, he wants that. Yeah, because I want to put up the talking notes on one side that I want everyone to see so they know where I'm talking from, and I want to just put pictures on this side because I don't really want to use PowerPoint because that PowerPoint thing's cumbersome. I can just do it easier this way. Well, yes, we can accommodate that. We can accommodate just about anything we want because when we made the canvas, we didn't straitjacket ourselves. And I thank Peter and his group for doing that because he said, well, today you don't want this, but tomorrow you might want that. And so we built the system with extra ports, extra capacity to do that, so it was literally just a programming change.
Yeah, so one of the challenges from a design standpoint that you had on the project was legacy products that needed to be included. And talk about how you were able to overcome some of the existing products and
Legacy?
No?
We wiped it all out.
I thought you said that there was some requirements for some of the systems to remain in place.
Nope.
No?
No, I mean, the only thing related to that real quickly is that there were some existing systems on
VTCs.
That there was some experience in terms of, okay, this is what didn't work.
Yes.
But the decision was made, we've got to unify everything. And that's a really big one, getting back to, talking about the getting IT departments to really understand that to make AV work reliably, I mean, everybody in here, I think, knows the fact that you walk into an enterprise that's big enough that there's lots of moving parts and pieces, and there's no one person often that's going to spearhead the AV part. It's this department has these rooms, and they went out and did this, and that department has that rooms, and they went out and did that. And at the end of the day, sometimes IT gets dragged in because, oh, well, you guys know how to make this stuff work, and you just fix it, whatever's wrong with it. And what we often have to do is with a new client is sit down with IT or whoever, or facilities often, or sometimes both of them, and explain, guys, you've got to standardize on what you're doing. You can't let these departments go out and do their own thing. You've got to give them a menu of choices of, you want a room, you have a budget, fine, it's your budget, fine, but this is what we're going to support. So if you're going to call us, you have to have one of these approved designs. And Andrew already got that, and I think that was a learning curve. Don't put words in your mouth, but that was a learning curve from prior rooms and prior systems is that we've got to standardize. So when it came to the new systems and new designs, the decision was, well, we're not going to try to weave in the old stuff because we're going to end up with this disjointed rooms and systems, and it's not going to be simple to use.
The funniest thing out of the first series of rooms is that at that time I reported up to the VP of operations, and he's like, look, we've hung televisions on the walls all these years. Why don't you just go to Costco and buy another television and do that again? I go, okay, how many more service desk people are you going to give me? He goes, I'm not going to give you any. I go, well, that's why we're not going to Costco and hanging another television on the wall. Because every time someone walks in with the newest computer and has a resolution that's not supported by that television, my guys spend 30 to 45 minutes with a pissed off user who can't who can't present on the screen, and we end up going and getting an old laptop that we keep just for those people and putting them on it. And they're like, this looks terrible. I mean, we're in this modern technology and you're giving me this old thing? That's the image that we had to be. And frankly, we didn't want to stick a computer in every room just to make it work. When we knew that the technology advanced to the point where we didn't need to supply extra things. There was, I don't know, how many different boxes did we put in to overcome the resolution issues? Like there's a box for removing the the coding changes and whatnot.
Yeah. So I mean, they're definitely, when VTC comes into play, as you guys probably know, you've got some issues. They were using Macs quite often at the executive level. So there were definitely some little tricks that we had to do to make content sharing from an Apple TV work to VTC. And that was something that we had fortunately done before, but and in this case, they've got a DM system, which that was an early discussion as, okay, are we going to stay with circuit switching, or are we going to go to packet switching? And 4 years ago, that was far less advanced than it is now, and it's still a conversation. But reminded me of one thing you said, and back to the tie two different subjects together on ROI, and if I remember this correctly, Andrew, we were doing a walkthrough with a potential client a couple years ago, and talked about supporting the rooms and the cost difference in your staff compared to then and now. I thought that might be
well, the biggest cost difference is that instead of having someone specialized to a room, any of my service desk people can go into a room, because just as it's easy for the executives, it's also easy for our staff. Yeah, if we need to change something big, call in the integrator. Rewrite the code, the integrator handles that. But someone calls up and says, hey, I'm in this room, I'm trying to project on Apple TV, and I have the VTC on here, and I don't know what to do. We pick up any of our iPads, we open the application, we go, okay, that room, he wants to do this, and he goes, how's it? And I haven't left my desk yet, mind you. How is it? He goes, oh, it's okay, I'm on screen. Done. Because in our world, we think about how people are most effective. The time between walking from this point to this point is ineffective time. We receive, that is overhead to us. A service desk person, an IT person, a salesperson are most effective doing what they're paid to do. If I solve your problem and it takes me 1 minute as opposed to 5 minutes to walk to you and then 1 minute to fix it, that's 5 minutes I get back. That 5 minutes compounded across all of my staff, compounded across all of my rooms, it's priceless.
So, hey guys, we have a question from the audience back here. Why did you choose to put the AV on top of or integrate it with the IT network versus having it standalone network?
Because I don't allow rogue networks in my environment. If we are very specific in the gear that we purchase, we're very specific in the control environment, and frankly, there is no gear that I can't control on my network. If we find it, usually one of my senior guys plus a couple service desk guys walk into a room, reach back wherever it is, rip it out, and then walk away. And then the senior guy sits there and listens to whoever complained about why we're doing something terrible to him because we won't let him have his rogue access point or his special media streaming thing that eats up bandwidth. So when Peter told me he was going to put in these AV-specific switches, I told him, the answer to him was very simply, no, you will not. He goes, well, your switches won't do it. I go, oh, I bet they will. Tell me what it is. And then he gave me a whole bunch of technical names. Dante was one of them, a whole bunch of others. And so my guys got out on the network, out on the internet. We, of course, we went to the Oracle of all knowledge, Google. We searched the names. We went and found out what the requirements were. We went, we checked our switches. Sure enough, our switches would do it if we set a couple settings. We broke off a VLAN. We put those settings on that network. We removed spanning tree because spanning tree, for whatever reason, doesn't get along with AV. And bada bing, bada boom, we had a network that would work. And a stunned look on Peter's face because he didn't believe it would work, and I told him it would.
He exaggerates.
But at the end of the day, I got what I wanted, which was complete and control of my environment, which from a security standpoint, which Director of IT, I also have a big role in security, is huge. Equipment I know, equipment that I can protect, minimizing the surface area is important when you're thinking of security. And so when we brought the gear in, it had to work within our networking environment. So that's why we didn't build a separate network.
Do we have another question back there?
Jeff Stansfield, Advantage Video Systems. Three questions. First of all, the term, executive simple. I work with a lot of executives, and they all have egos. Do you get kickback from them being like that? Sounds like they're stupid and stuff like that. Second of all, did you interact with them as far as like surveys to ask them what their input, or did you just IT figures out what they want and then gives it to the executives? And then the last question is how much division is continuing on after service, after the system's put in, is on you, and how much is the integrator doing to support the systems?
So, Jeff, give me your first question again, because you fired out three. I got the last.
Okay. So the first one is calling it executive simple is kind of like a lot of executives that I work with would
Does that piss
consider
them
that
off?
an insult.
Gotcha. Well, this is how I put it. And I did get a question from one executive who had a particularly large ego. But I said to him, how much is your time worth? And he says, it's worth a lot of money. I go, right. Executive simple has nothing to do with your intelligence level. It has to do with the amount of time you're willing to spend dealing with this before now we are wasting money. He goes, oh, okay. Because at the end of the day, most of my executives, while they have really big egos about their ability to move plastic, huge egos when it comes to moving plastic, most of them understand, look, this technology stuff, I don't know it. I don't want to know it. I don't want to be involved with it. I want to walk in the room and I just want my thing on that screen. And this is what they say to me. And so my answer to them was, okay. And most all the rest of them understood what executive simple was. The one executive who didn't, he said, well, I don't believe you've made this. I go, there's a room. Take your phone, put it on the screen. He goes, oh, you don't have AirPlay in there. I go, look, here's $20. I will give you $20. He goes, well, what do I have to give you if you're right? I go, you just have to say I was right. Now, for someone with an ego, I was getting the better end of the deal. And sure enough, he goes in there and he goes, fine, yeah. And there was about a pause of about 30 seconds. And he's switching screens, he's putting up stuff, he streams a movie of his kids he had on his phone. He goes, well, this won't repeat. So he turns it all off and does it again. He's like, you were right. I go, thank you very much, and walked out of the room.
What about the other part of the question where, like, getting feedback from executives as you kind of build this? Do you need to find out what they're comfortable with?
I didn't have to go for that feedback.
Right.
They gave it. These are guys with egos.
Yeah.
And when they like something, they generally don't say much. When they don't like something, you don't really have to ask. They'll tell you.
But
in spades.
I do remember in the early design phases, we brought in 3 or 4 executive assistants.
Yes, the executive assistants were also, because they're the ones who got saddled with this. The executive would, like I said, a minute and a half. That's all I get with them. Then they go, routinely. Carol has been with our company. Carol is one of our oldest executive assistants. And I would be walking around the building and I'd know that someone was going to get called because I'd hear, Carol, come make this thing work. Okay, someone's in the room. So I go over and sure enough, here's Carol. She let me go. And I go, okay. And then I just go and leave. And so when we brought them in, and this is why version 1 never made it to light, They stood there and stared at the pan and they go, what is this? This isn't easier. You got a whole bunch of buttons here that make no sense to me. Moreover, they're not even buttons, they're little icons. So we went back and we redid the interface. It's up on the board right now. We redid that, made the buttons for selecting inputs. This is one of our most complicated rooms. The buttons for inputs are very clear. They open the lid, there's the input box. They can see, oh, input 1, input 1. And going there and having those folks in was actually more powerful than having the executives in there, because the executives don't care about the rooms when they don't need them. They only care about when they do. The executive assistants care about not needing to be yelled at to get a room working. So a lot of the feedback came through them and the feedback from the rooms, and the former facilities manager, who was the vice president of operations, had said to me, he goes, every time we do something in these rooms, no one's ever happy. You can't make them happy. Well, I always like a good challenge. So the goal was to get the people so that when the executives walked in, when we had the Exmo representatives, when we had all these bigwigs come through, that they looked at our space, they looked at our product, they looked at what we were doing for them, and the room was just part of the experience. So, and there was a third question, Jeff, you had. Can you give me the third one?
The third one is, what's the division going forward of how much your staff puts into maintaining the system as opposed to the integrator?
The integrator, so it's really interesting because one of the requirements I put on from day one is that the integrator was not going to live in my site. I was going to call them for big changes. Our stance on consultants across the board is we do SOWs. You have a clear beginning, a clear thing you're going to produce, and a clear end. If you do a great job with that, we invite you back to do it again.
So no service contract?
No, there's a service. No, I'm getting there.
Okay.
But so you don't get the service contract if you don't produce the SOW. So what we evolved into was we call them when something in the rack's not working right, or when a projector won't go up. And oddly enough, that happens with projectors. We only have one, and we replaced it, and love it. But it was an old legacy. It was the one thing that you had to keep.
Yeah, it was the one thing.
They didn't provide it, and finally, after 2 months of not having it go up, I just said, "Fine, if that projector's not going to do it, put another one in." I digress. But at the end of the day, if you accomplish your first SOW with Ravago, you become a partner. And partnerships are different than vendors or even integrators, because it means that when I want to know something about the technology, I call Peter. And note I didn't say I call my sales rep. I call Peter, because Peter and I had
There's
relationship.
other people in engineering too besides me.
Right. I still call you. And we actually sit down and we kick it around. Hey, I'm thinking about this. And what's it going to do to the system? And the neat thing is that even if Peter doesn't know the answer, he'll be back to me within a day and goes, well, this is how it's going to make it better. This is how it's going to make it worse. So to answer your question, I would say it's probably 60% us, 40% the integrator.
Jay McCardle has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask, you talked about your executives and the executive simple being, like their time being valuable. How long does it take from the time that they walk into the room to the time their meeting's starting? Is that something that you've quantified? Because normally it's 15 minutes as a general industry thing that you have to schedule the room out 15 minutes beforehand, and something that we've done a lot of research on.
15 minutes? Boy, that's luxurious. We're talking sometimes 3 minutes. If the room's available, it is not uncommon to have the executive assistant calling me while she's scheduling the room. At that moment, goes, oh, by the way, so-and-so's going in that room, and you know how difficult he is. I go, okay, call me if he has a problem. Since we put this in, I don't get those calls anymore. Because the funny thing is, the higher up the food chain that the individual is, the higher up the food chain the IT guy who responds is. So if they have a C in front of their name, they get the IT director. If they have something less than a C, they may get the IT director or any one of my staff, depending on who's available at the time. We have literally cut out, even with that incredibly short setup time, we've cut our AV-related calls by 92%. We would do Each one of our conference rooms is used every single day. Some of them by multiple people, some of them are one meeting going long. We would have anywhere from 5 to 10 calls a day. 5 to 10 calls a day for any given conference room. That's mostly gone now. Very simply put, part of our morning routine, we check, make sure all those rooms are responding, making sure all the things are up, but even so, all the rooms respond. It's just a precautionary check because we know if the rooms respond in the morning, they'll respond when people show up to use them. So, does that answer your question?
Do you have a metric on it though, how long it takes?
Yeah, about 3 minutes is about what most of them walk in. So they walk in, they touch, and I've watched a lot of people come through and do this. They walk in, they grab the pad off the wall, they touch what they want, they plug in the computer, everything shows up. Here comes the stampede. They have their meeting, they press the off button, they put the thing back on the wall. Most of the time they put the cables back in, put the cables in, we put nice retractors in. Most of the time they use them, and they close it up and it's ready for the next group. That was the other thing, was cable neatness. I don't know if you all remember back in the day when everyone just had the cables in the center of the table and you had this little spaghetti mess. We drove out of it. The picture that's up on the screen is a classic example of that. So is this table. You'll see that very little is on the table. You'll see that there's a VTC thing, there's the control panel, and there's the Mac, but that's about as busy as we like a room to be. We like them nice, neat. When people walk out of the room, we don't want cables everywhere. If I had my way, we'd be all wireless, but we're not quite there yet.
I think we have another question, and then I want to get to a final point. I think there's a question in the back there.
Yeah, my name's Adam Dox. I'm with Advanced Video Group. My question's more towards the integrator here. We've talked about the metrics and the cost savings for the executive on the client side, but it sounds like this project had a number of revisions and scope changes. So in terms of metrics from the integrator, how do you stay on task on something like this and profitable when your highest, paying resources, your programmers and your engineers, are what seems to be in bed mostly with this project, once it's kicked off?
Mm-hmm. Good question. When we start with any new client, there's absolutely a learning curve to understand and reconcile what we thought they wanted in the design phase versus what they actually wanted in implementation. We were fortunate in this case, very high expectations, but phases of work in terms of we didn't have to deliver 15 rooms all at once. So from that regard, we were able to learn really what is it going to take to do it. And after the first phase of work, we were able to get very proficient at delivering exactly what they wanted. Almost all of our projects are design build. So when we're in the design phase, and that doesn't just include engineering, that's user interface design. We've got one of our programmers really leans more towards simply the user interface. He's got a web design background. That whole process of knowing, okay, we've got a client that we're going to have to do a custom user interface for. We know roughly what it's going to take. But yeah, on the first phase of work, we were definitely over on even what we thought for this particular one, what we thought we were going to be. But not a huge order of magnitude. But a little bit more insight on what we do. And again, I think coming back from the luxury residential space, we're not in our specialization, especially in the corporate space. We're not in the get in and get out as quickly as possible. And we're in what I would even call the luxury corporate space, where we're going to include and account for. This is not what's the minimum number of hours our programmer thinks it's going to take to do. I'll sit down with the programming team and they'll give me a number, and they're not in here so I can say this. And I will usually add anywhere from 25 to 50%, sometimes 100% to whatever they say, to what we're actually going to budget in the numbers, because those guys always think, yeah, everything goes right, it's going to take me 40 hours or 80 hours or 100 hours. I can tell you that, and I apologize, I didn't bring any. I'm happy to, if anybody wants to follow up, I can share with you the numbers and the size of the project. But I want to say the first major phase of this project, which was one floor, I want to say we had over 100 hours of programming and user interface design. And that would be for four major rooms, five rooms, I guess.
Well, the first go-round of programming in phase one was for all 4 rooms,
Right.
but 3 of the rooms got a major renovation after we fixed the first room.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Okay, so we have to wrap it up. We have like 1 minute. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Andrew, you're a customer. We don't typically get a customer on stage. At the sort of the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about kind of the process and talking to other integrators and leading up to eventually, going with the integrator that you're happy with. What are some of the things that turn you off about an integrator during that decision-making phase? What are some things they say, or maybe things they demonstrate in terms of their understanding of the network, or things that just make you realize this relationship is not going to work?
The biggest challenge is when I open up a presentation, and really it's just a bill of materials for a bunch of boxes. Mm-hmm. Doesn't talk about what's going to be built, doesn't indicate that in our exploratory conversations when we were sitting down and talking about what the requirements were, that any consideration being given to those conversations. Some of the folks who did not win the contract when we were putting it out to bid met with me for 30 minutes to an hour and produced a $500,000 deal, and really didn't even do anything more than just a basic exploratory conversation before they made that quote. What we were asking for was not going to be easy. If all I wanted was a pallet full of boxes and somebody to string the cable between them, I arguably could have gone and bought all that myself and done it myself. We were trying to get out of that business. I was looking for people who are going to bring solid expertise to the table, people who had done this before, who were going to give us a world-class presentation. I mean, like I said, ExxonMobil. If any of you have ever been to ExxonMobil's headquarters, the place is fantastic. The building does everything short of help you right after you go to the bathroom. I mean, that's how nice their facilities are. We weren't going to pay that kind of millions of dollars for a conference room, but we were looking to get it to the point where when someone walked in, they would go, wow, this is a really great experience. Not this is great AV technology. This is a really great experience. And most of the people I talked to either were more worried about their measurements, or they were more worried about how much the job was worth, or they were more worried about whether they're going to go Crestron, Extron, and pick the name of the boxes. The difference was when Zio came in, they sat down with me and they actually listened to and understood what Executive Simple was. And they even actually put it in a quote, to achieve Executive Simple, this is how many programming hours, so forth, so on. They actually demonstrated that they had heard what I had said.
Good.
So I would say that the biggest differentiator is the quality of listening and the feedback received.
Excellent. So Andrew Mercantini from Ravago Americas, Peter Shipp from Zio. Let's hear it for these guys. And I know we have some instructions about our next steps and staying on schedule.
First of all, I want to thank Brian and Black Box for their sponsorship of this session and for teaching us about getting Amish. I think we're all going to use that.